Welcome back to Built to Ship, the podcast where we go behind the scenes with founders and product leaders shipping real AI products into the world. I'm your host, Tyler Postal from Voker, and today I'm excited to be joined by another YC alum, Haakam, founder of AgentMail, an AI email platform designed for agents, where autonomous workflows can send, receive, and manage email on your behalf. Haakam, it's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Tyler. It's a pleasure.
Awesome. Well, why don't we start with the founding story? How'd you come up with this idea? How'd you meet your co-founders, and walk us through the journey.
Yeah, my co-founders and I, my other two co-founders are Michael and Adi. We're best friends from college. We all went to University of Michigan, and we actually joined a business frat at the same time in sophomore year. And yeah, we've been together ever since. Always on our mind to perhaps build something. It wasn't really until senior year when we all had our jobs lined up that we, started thinking more seriously about doing that. And this was like late 2024 when we started to see people like talk about agents online. Mind you, it was pretty early back then, still is very early now. But the kind of the first idea that we had was like, okay, agents sound cool. It'd be really nice if they could just make us money passively online. That sounded like something that they could potentially do, and like seemed like it was worth giving a shot. So the first idea we had was actually to build AI agents to automate drop shipping. So it more of like a get rich quick scheme, right? Like basically finding a product on Alibaba, building a Shopify store, running ads, and like having an agent run this entire process and like repeat it multiple times.
And I love that because drop shipping is kind of the age old get rich quick scheme. So now you're like automating that.
Yeah.
It's to date myself, but like that was the cool thing to do when I was in college. I had friends dropping out of college to do drop shipping. Mm-hmm. And now it's crazy that in, just a few years now you're dropping out of school or finishing school to do automation of drop shipping.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, like I think we knew that like drop shipping is pretty like saturated. It was more of like an experiment that we were kind of doing. Like, okay, is this even feasible for an agent to like make some revenue by itself? And so the first thing we like pretty quickly we realized, okay, Shopify gives you a 1 week free trial for every email address you sign up with. So we didn't want to pay for Shopify. So we were like, okay, there must be some service out there where we can programmatically create email inboxes for our AI agents. Like it just seemed intuitive to us that this already would have existed. And then we learned that it didn't. The closest thing is like Gmail, like the Gmail API, which has a lot of limitations. Like you can't even use the API to create new inboxes. And even if you could, like the pricing is like pretty like restrictive. And we started thinking some more like, okay, there's a lot more, like if we were to build, say like a API first email provider, there's a lot more use cases than just free trials, right? Basically like email is the identity layer on the internet. It is the, most universal communication platform, like protocol. And also like a lot of context that people use for their work lives within their email. So definitely we saw like, okay, in a future where agents are users on the internet, it would make sense for them to have an email provider that was designed for them.
Amazing. And I think like maybe you wouldn't have come to that idea if you hadn't tried that first idea. And even though you knew maybe this isn't the one, that's an amazing part about where we're at as an industry right now. There's so much that hasn't been built. Mm-hmm. We were the same way when we were starting to build Voker in, summer of 2024. There's so many tools. We're like, well, there must be like, a QA tool for tool calls for agents. And we're like, wait, that doesn't exist yet. And so just trying to build something, you realize there's gaps, and then maybe you get another idea for something that's even more exciting. Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about the product. Who are your end customers? I mean, it sounds like it's agents, but there's probably still humans that are interacting to buy the product, or how does it work?
Yeah, so it's a very like horizontal product with a lot of different use cases. And yes, it ranges from like humans making the decisions to purchase AgentMail for the kind of building B2B products on top of it, all the way to agents that are signing up for AgentMail without the knowledge of without the human having knowledge of even what AgentMail is. So happy to kind of like cover both sides of the spectrum.
Yeah.
On the kind of B2B side, like some of the interesting kind of use cases we've seen are, for example, procurement. A lot of like pretty much every decentralized marketplace runs on email, right? And so think, for example, in logistics, booking, shipping, and trucking loads, that happens over email. It's like a back and forth conversation to reach out to vendors, get quotes, negotiate prices, execute, a transaction. Same thing for like hiring influencers for brands, or we've even seen helping consumers buy cars. A lot of kind of like transactions and like discovery of like prices and products happens over email. So that's kind of like one of the biggest pillars of the B2B side of AgentMail. And there's other areas as well, like, like legal, customer support, compliance, recruiting. Every single vertical uses email. And pretty much if you have any kind of role that has traditionally involved sending and receiving a lot of email, like two-way email communication, AgentMail is great for automating that. And then on the other side of things, we are almost somewhat becoming a consumer like tool. Like we have thousands of daily active users, and these are like non-technical users who are like, a good portion of them are, and they're simply like trying to give their agent, like an OpenClaw agent or whatever other form factor, its own email inbox. And there, the main use case is identity, right? They're not so much so like trying to communicate back and forth with their agent over email, although some like will like forward emails and like have the agent like pick up tasks based on that. But the key thing is like having the agent has its own identity. So now it can go and run off on the internet and sign up for other services and build things and do things, and without basically having to assume the identity of a human and like, ask permission from them. The agent kind of becomes its own internet user.
That's very interesting. Yeah, I definitely want to dig into both of those different sides of the equation, but maybe tell us a bit more about the product itself. So at a high level, I can make sense. Okay, it's an email inbox for agents. What does that look like under the hood? Is it kind of a traditional, email infrastructure company, or are there like agentic parts to your product? Or is it like, hey, we're building quote unquote the boring stuff so your agents can be more powerful?
Yeah, we are building the boring stuff, but we're kind of building it in a different way, right? So like we have built effectively Gmail. So you have inboxes. In those inboxes, you have threads. Threads have messages. Messages have attachments. You want to label them, filter them, search them, forward them. Everything you get when you log into Gmail, we give to agents, and we expose this through an API. So there are some like design considerations of like making this really scalable for like the future, in which there may be billions or like tens, even more, like more agents, right, running around with email addresses. And so like in terms of like the actual like software architecture, like there's been some decisions there of like, okay, we don't, if you want to get like nitty gritty, like in our data model, like our query patterns, we don't do any joins across tables. And so we use like NoSQL that scales horizontally very well. So we can handle like very like, high throughput, spiky workloads at low latency across multiple regions, East Coast, West Coast. These are the kind of things we think about that perhaps were not the main focus when like Gmail was built, right? And then, yeah, in terms of like, yeah, like you said, or sorry, like I said, it's an email provider, and the agents can use that just like a human, like to pretty much do the same things that a human would do with theirs. The main difference is the architecture, and then also the interface through which the agent interacts with it.
Very cool. Well, let's talk about interface a bit. Is there an actual UI? Are these browser use agents, or I assume, are they more like making API calls? And if so, is that generally through tool calls, or like, how does that work?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's a UI. We have a like fully functional like console. It looks like we made it look and feel like Gmail, so it feels familiar for humans, that want to perhaps oversee their agents, what they're doing, or if you want to use it as your email provider, you can. We have some customers doing that. So we have a UI. The main interface for it, like at the end of the day, it is like a REST HTTP API. In terms of how agents connect to that, sometimes they will like literally write raw curl requests, or they use our SDKs like Python and TypeScript, MCP as well, and then we also have a CLI. So our goal is like to, just offer everything that an agent might want to use. Yeah, we don't really see, I guess there's not much of a point in like having a browser agent try and manipulate AgentMail when we have the APIs. So
Totally.
that is the goal. So every single, like, also like we live by having every single thing that is available in our UI and dashboard is accessible via API as well. And that's what I think like where the world is headed. Can talk
I
on
love
that.
that. No, I think that's true too. And I think that would have been nice even before agents and LLMs for everything to work that way. Like most engineers would have appreciated
Yeah.
that UI was, just a layer on top of, if, accessible APIs. It was really interesting to hear about like how you've had to design email a little bit differently, whether it's through, your type of database queries, et cetera, because you're thinking about where agents are going and how they use email differently than a human. Like they might send hundreds of emails, like in the time a human would send one.
Mhm.
Um, when it comes to building the APIs, what's different? Like I get that, okay, everything needs to have an API, but
Yeah.
is there anything you've learned that makes it work well for agents? I've seen across like our experience that people will focus a lot on like, oh, you need to update tool descriptions and things like that. But lots of times the agent gets it right of like what tool to use, but then it hits a rate limit, or you didn't realize that there's this part of your API of how it works that's not documented. And so the
Mhm.
agent couldn't expect it. Are there any learnings you found there in terms of how you design your APIs to work well for agents?
Yeah, so we build everything kind of assuming that there is no like tool descriptions, because like tool descriptions are a client side thing that we can't necessarily enforce, right? Um, so basically, the idea is like your API routes should be tool descriptions as much as you can make them. So, for
Mm,
example, Gmail does not have an endpoint like a route to reply to an email. You actually have to have like kind of knowledge of how like email headers work and like construct the proper sequence of headers that will actually create a email reply,
that's
right? And so
crazy.
like that's not something you can even like an agent can figure out without referencing some other documentation, right? Where we have like a reply endpoint, like slash reply. You just give us the message ID that you want to reply to. We have slash reply all. We have slash forward. So like this is the kind of idea is like it should be self-documenting, right? Um, and then also like thinking about like validation. Like oftentimes like agents might make some it's non-deterministic, so they may not have like fully well-formed requests, right? Now the thing is like when you have a developer that is integrating your API and it's like this like deterministic code that is calling your API, you can rely on documentation that the developer reads this documentation and this code doesn't change too much. But like we think a lot about error messages. They should be very helpful. Even like basic things like validation, like hey, this email like we say like word for verbatim like the email address is malformed, make sure you include an at symbol, like things like that where historically may have lived within like the API reference or docs on other APIs. We want it to be dynamic and like return that in the response, right? And here's another kind of like very cool thing that I think we're on the frontier of is providing like so support for us looks a lot different than other APIs, right? It's like literally because we give agents email inboxes so they can send emails, we get a lot of support emails from agents, right? Because they're like they will literally like call an endpoint and be like, oh, I got this validation error, I can't quite figure out what it is. And then they'll like send us an email, be like, hey, this is the error, like this is how to reproduce it. And so we started getting like all these emails to our support inbox, and we realized these are agents that are like really running into
That's
errors
amazing.
in the email. So then we're like, okay, let's like design for this. We haven't rolled this out yet, but we're planning to like include a special support address for agents to send like support tickets in real time. And then
That's
we'll
cool.
have agents responding to those agent requests so that basically the support tickets can get resolved in like seconds. Um,
Amazing.
so like, yeah, some of the cool things we're working on.
I mean, with what you mentioned about like the error messaging and stuff, that's another to me like a breath of fresh air where, not to knock some people in the AI space, but there's a lot of people who are kind of like, oh, we don't need to worry about code quality. We don't need to worry about infrastructure quality. It's all magic and it all worked perfectly. I think people will soon learn that's not true. But I love that you guys are like taking real best practices and principled approaches to like, again, whether it's how you format your API so that they work well and they're self-explanatory, or the error messaging, like those are also things that like just would have been nice pre-agents for engineers to have. And maybe it took AI to kind of force us to kind of like build these principles into products. So it's great that you guys are building infrastructure that is, well thought out. Yeah, I'm curious to, before we get close to wrapping up here, when it comes to, like the AI features of your product, it sounds like one of those is going to be agents that respond to these inboxes. But most everything else, it sounds like, is like, traditional infrastructure, which is still important. And I think a lot of people kind of gloss over that kind of fact. Like, hey, if you're having millions of agents or billions doing things on the internet, we still need to build non-agentic systems. Is there anything else you could share around that? Is there anything in your product that is beyond those designs that like is powered by agents, or is most of what you see as important is like having those foundations and building blocks be solid for other people?
Yeah, I mean, our entire thesis is the foundation. So as of right now, we actually don't use LLMs within our product at all. So like no token usage. We may add like additional features later involving that. But I would describe us as like an internet infrastructure company. And I think there will be a lot more internet infrastructure companies because a lot of services do need to be rebuilt. Like email is just like one small part of that. I think like literally every service imaginable needs to be like treat agents as first-class users. And either that's the incumbents are going to adapt to do that, or we'll get kind of replaced by startups, right? So like everything like CRMs or, like customer support platforms, or even like social media, maybe not in the sense of like human social media, but like I think in the future, like right now there's a value in like human attention, right? Like people pay to get in front of a human. I think in the future people will pay to get in front of an agent, especially as agents have more purchasing power and like the decision making for that purchasing power. So like there's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be built for like specifically for agents as users.
Totally. Yeah. You're speaking our language, because, kind of our analogy is in like the devs tool space. Like I was mentioning, when we first were building, early days of Voker, we expected there'd be all those tools like, observability, testing, QA tools, monitoring, analytics. And hey, a lot of that doesn't exist. It's all still built for the old way of doing things. So a lot of opportunity and a lot still to be built. Before we have to wrap up, I want to put your website up on the screen so you can share with the folks listening in how they can follow along with AgentMail, how they can get in touch. That's agentmail.to. Is that the right URL?
Yes, that's correct. And yeah, you can also follow us on socials, X @AgentMail. Also, one cool thing for the viewers to experiment with is we have another website called agent.email. And this is designed for your agents to be able to sign up for AgentMail without any human in the loop.
That's cool.
We actually have a public API endpoint for agents to be able to sign up for AgentMail and start using it. And
Let me put that one up on the screen real quick.
You can open up
email.
Yeah. You can open up a fresh instance of Claude Code, tell it about agent.email, and it'll be able to sign up without you having to do anything.
Very cool. Yeah, I'm so curious about these kind of design patterns. Like for our product, we're analytics for the agentic era, and sure, we can give docs for developers to set things up, but we're wondering like, what are the patterns to give agents the ability to set it up? Whether that's a Claude Code prompt or this is a great idea. So is this like kind of a terminal that they'll kind of like run API requests through, or how does this work?
Yeah. So if an agent makes a curl request for this, they get like a text file which documents the endpoint that they have to hit to sign up, and then they can hit that endpoint. We do require them to give us a email address that we then send an OTP code to, and then the agent's job is to then convince the human, like, hey, I just signed up for AgentMail. It's really useful. Just give me this OTP code. Then we can verify this agent is actually owned by someone, and then we unlock the account to basically do anything.
Super cool. Okay, so that's agent.mail or agent.email and agentmail.to. Follow along. Tell your agent to go check it out. I know we're at time. This has been really great conversation. Thank you for sharing so much about what you guys have learned and what you've built.
Oh yeah, I mean, it was a pleasure, and I appreciate you for having me on.
Of course, we'll have to check back in a future season and see where you guys are at, and start telling us how agents are using email in ways we never could have expected. But for now, that's the episode. Thanks everyone for listening to Built to Ship. If you're building something, go ship it, and see you next time.